All right. Hi, guys. How are we doing? Okay, so before I get started, we're going to take a super quick little stretch break. Stay silent, stand up, stretch if you need to, like 15, 20 seconds. Silent-ish. All right. All right, stretch and sit down. That was quick, but we're chugging along. I am the last section before dinner. And I have the privilege of talking to you guys about principles from the wisdom literature. Now, the wisdom literature, if you guys don't know, is Proverbs. I wonder, is that working? Okay, I know how to work this. But yes, the wisdom literature is Job, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and Song of Songs. I will not be speaking on Song of Songs tonight, but we're going to be diving into the wisdom literature and trying to get a picture of what does the wisdom literature have to say about money and wealth. And if you know or are familiar with the wisdom literature, you know that it is a collection of literature that was passed down through generations, and it's very sophisticated. It talks about the nuances of human experience. It addresses a lot of different topics, a lot of different issues, and it's meant to be read together. It's meant to be read together because you can't just take one book or one section of a book out of context and try to read it and make a rule out of it. Because if you do, you miss the full picture of what the scripture's saying about life and what it means to be a human trying to figure out this very complicated thing called life. It's not rooted in a specific special revelation from God necessarily, but it is observational. It's about looking around the world and making observations and then drawing these principles and these ideas about what it means to be someone who's following God. A lot of the wisdom literature, because it is observational, like even the pagans could read it and say like, yeah, like generally that makes sense, that I'm tracking. It makes sense to me. And I think that through the wisdom literature, the Bible is really speaking to the everyday experience of people. Like for us, we don't necessarily spend 45 minutes every day praying about whether or not we're going to eat out, or at least I do not. But making our decisions, thinking about our lives, like it's not necessarily every single day or every single decision that we're going to have is a special revelation from God, but our decisions should be guided by God and by godly principles. So, I really got to figure out how to do this. Okay, I went too far, I think. Did I? No, I didn't. Okay. So what is wisdom? What is wisdom? I said earlier, but wisdom is really about looking at the world around us and making our decisions while trying to look like God. The wisdom literature, again, is meant to be read together and held in balance with other wisdom books. And I think that's true of wisdom in general. It's meant to be held in balance with other wisdom. For example, we can read the Proverbs and get a lot of really good principles from Proverbs, but we also have to hold that in tension with Jesus' teachings. Wisdom is about thinking longer term. It's not like a quick answer. I know that sometimes we try to use Proverbs as like fortune cookie sayings, and it's like, yeah, this one proverb makes a lot of sense. It's really great. But I think when we try to condense it into this really simple statement that I can just say and believe and apply to every single thing in my life, it really doesn't address the nuance of our life. It doesn't really address the fullness of what God's trying to teach us. When I was talking to Brandon about this, he said that he likes to say wisdom complicates everything, and I think that that's exactly right. Wisdom isn't a quick fix. It takes considering multiple viewpoints. Proverbs 14:15 says, "The simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps." And I think that it uses the word simple here almost as like an insult. Like, yeah, the simple people believe everything. But looking at things from a simplistic perspective is foolish. At the end of Ecclesiastes 1, the writer says, For in much wisdom is much grief, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. And I can't help that he's writing this a little bit melodramatically, but he's writing because he realized that the more that he learned about the world and the wiser that he became, the more complicated life became. Easy answers didn't tend to hold up in the long term. So memorizing a proverb can't give me all of the answers, but reading the wisdom literature can give me a fuller picture of what it looks like to live in God's world and to really try and honor God. It can tell me a lot of generally true principles. So that's what we're going to be doing with the wisdom literature today. We're going to be going through the books and trying to pull some principles about money and wealth from them. And the wisdom literature, like, there's a lot in there. And so I tried to get some principles that hopefully you guys can research more on your own. But we're going to start with Job. So the book of Job is unique in the wisdom literature because it is not connected to King Solomon as the other books are. And so we know the author of the book, but it's this we don't know the author of the book, sorry. But it's this story about this wealthy man named Job. And in the very first few verses of the book, we learn that he not only is he wealthy, but he's also a righteous man. And so through the story, Job goes from being extremely wealthy. He has land, he has money, he has servants who are part of his property. And he goes from having all these things to losing everything. He loses his wealth, his property, his family. And I really don't have time to go into the entire story, but I wanted to focus on Job's character, especially surrounding his wealth. I really gotta, okay. Darby, can you? Thanks, Queen. Okay, Job chapter 31 is often called the Old Testament Sermon on the Mount because in it, Job talks through all of the ways that he views his money and possessions and the ways that he tries to be righteous in his actions. He talks about the ways that he treats his servants, the poor, the orphans, the widows. In Job 31, verses 13 through 15, it says, "If I've denied justice to any of my servants, whether male or female, when they had a grievance against me, what will I do when God confronts me? What will I answer when called to account? Did not he who made me in the womb make them? Did not the same one form us both within our mothers?" And he continues this through verse 28 of the chapter, talking about how he gave to those in need, and he made sure to honor God, and he didn't put his trust in wealth. And so I think that the principle that we can pull from Job is that the motives of our hearts matter. The motives of our hearts matter. And if anyone has the right to talk about wealth and the importance of how you use your wealth to honor God, it really is Job. Because again, he's a very wealthy man. And he goes from having everything to losing everything to getting it all back again. He had the money, land, animal, servants. And here he's talking about how he treats other people well. Like, he makes a point to care for the poor and the widows. He doesn't put his security in his wealth because he knows that God is sovereign over those things. So it's not just the fact that he has wealth that's important, but it's his attitude towards his wealth and how he uses the power that comes from it. And I think for us, it's the same. It's the motives of our hearts when it comes to our money and our possessions and how we view our wealth, whether we have it or we don't have it. So the rest of Job is very good and very challenging in some ways, and so I highly recommend reading the rest of it. But I'm going to focus on Proverbs and Ecclesiastes for the rest of our time. So, Proverbs. Most of the Proverbs are attributed to King Solomon, and Proverbs by nature are sayings that are passed down and gain their authority by repetition. So a lot of them are very straightforward. It's stuff like, don't be stupid and wicked, or you will die. There are verses like that it's just straight sentences, and you're like, okay, what do I do with this? The goal of us looking through Proverbs is not to get some sort of 5-step plan to fix your finances. It really is to give us a robust view of how do we view our money, look at all these different perspectives. And the book of Proverbs alone mentions wealth and possessions over 130 times. Disclaimer on that number, I did Google it, but the point with that is that it mentions wealth and possessions a lot. So there's a lot that the wisdom literature has to say, specifically Proverbs, about this topic. And so we're going to go through some different principles, and there are lots of verse references with each of the principles, so I'm not going to talk about all of them, but you can go and read the verses on your own time and kind of see more about these principles. So the first principle is that it is God who blesses us, and we should first seek him and to honor him. Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6 say, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight." So if we are following God, we are to trust him. We are to seek him in everything that we do, including and especially, I'd say, how we use our money and how we view our wealth. Proverbs 11:4 says, "Wealth is worthless in the day of wrath, but righteousness delivers from death." Wealth and money and possessions won't save us from death, and we cannot take them with us when we die. But righteousness, this knowing and trusting and honoring God, that's what brings us real life, brings us eternal life. It's far more valuable than any earthly possession, and I think that we really need to remember that and keep that at the forefront of our minds when we're thinking about our money. Principle 2, seek good counsel. Okay, it is very, very easy to make decisions about your money on our own. I think we've talked about this a little bit already, but yeah, it's just a very American and I think modern idea that we don't really talk about finances and we make these decisions that are sort of impulsive and kind of big on our own and we don't talk to anyone. There's this SNL skit where it's like making fun of a Lexus commercial where the dad buys the mom a brand new Lexus for Christmas thinking that it's like this sweet gesture and she's gonna love it, and she flips out. She's like, "You bought a car without telling me?" But it's like, yeah, like that's absurd that you would make such a big decision without telling your spouse. And I think whether or not we're married, we should be talking to people about our decisions that we have to make. We should be letting people in to look at our finances and help us see whether or not we're being wise. Proverbs 11:14 says, "For lack of guidance a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors." Proverbs 12:15 says, "The way of fools seems right to them, but the wise listen to advice." 19:20 says, "Listen to advice and accept discipline, and at the end you'll be counted among the wise." So those are just a few of many other proverbs that also talk about, like, talk to other people. Wise people listen to other people. They ask questions. They want to hear multiple perspectives. They're not proud in thinking that they can make all the decisions on their own. So be wise. Listen to advice. Tell people about the things that you're thinking about with your money. Don't just make decisions. Principle 3, have self-control. Have self-control. This is sort of related to the not seeking counsel, but I think it's just really easy, especially with the internet, to fall into the trap of just like swiping your card every time you have an impulse. I know that many of you have fallen prey, as I have, to the TikTok shop or Instagram Reels or random ads online, because it's just easy to like, yeah, I want this thing and it's cheap and it's on sale. Oh my gosh, it's 50% off. Why is everything always 50% off all the time? Like, what is the price really? I don't know. But yeah, it's easy just to snowball into this thing that becomes out of control where we're just making decisions all the time without really thinking about them and thinking like, do I really need another sweatshirt? Or maybe, like, would it be wiser for me to save that money and use it for something else? Or buy a friend lunch or something simple like that. Proverbs 12:9 says, "Better to be a nobody and have a servant than pretend to be somebody and have no food." The Message version of this says, "Better to be ordinary and work for a living than act important and starve in the process." And I think that, yeah, this just really points to the fact that it's better to be humble, to live in reality of what decisions I can make that make sense for me, what things that I can spend my money on that make sense, versus trying to chase after some lifestyle or to try and like soothe some urge or need inside of me by buying things or making foolish decisions. Proverbs 25:28 says, "Like a city whose walls are broken through is a person who lacks self-control." A city with no walls is defenseless. It has no stability. It's vulnerable to attacks. We don't want our finances to look like that. We don't want to have instability when it comes to our finances. Proverbs 21:17 says, "Whoever loves pleasure will become poor. Whoever loves wine and olive oil will never be rich." Have self-control. Don't just spend your money on whatever you want to. Principle 4, be generous. Proverbs, certainly, as we've already seen, is not the only place that the scriptures talk about being generous. It's just one of many, many of the books that talk about how clear it is that generosity is a very big deal to God. Proverbs 11:24-25 says, "One person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly, but comes to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed." I really think that God honors our generosity. giving to advance God's kingdom will benefit us far more than trying to hold on so tightly to our money and our resources or spend them on us or use things for us. It's refreshing to us to care about other people, to bless them with what God has given us. It's why he blesses us. Proverbs 19:17 says, "Whoever's kind to the poor lends to the Lord, and he will reward them for what they have done." So be generous. Principle 5, hard work and good decision-making usually lead to increased prosperity. So this is like what I talked about before. Like, these are general principles. So this is usually. There are many proverbs that talk about guarding against laziness, avoiding laziness, and they commend hard work and saving money. Proverbs 6 through 11 says, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in the summer and gathers its food at harvest." I'm not going to read the rest of it, but I kept this version because I just really like the word sluggard. I think I'm going to start using that as an insult. But yeah, I mean, this is an observation that it's making here. It's like looking at the ants and look at how hard the ants work. They work hard, they gather food, they take care of themselves. Like, if an ant can do that, why can't we? If we're blessed with the ability to work, we should use that to honor God. Proverbs 27:23 through 27 says, "Be sure you know the condition of your flocks. Give careful attention to your herds. For riches do not endure forever, and a crown is not secure for all generations." I think what this is really addressing is, like, take stock of what you have. Like, pay attention to your finances. Put in some work. You can't just close your eyes and pretend like everything's just going to work without you. But yeah, we're called to join God with being good stewards of what he's given us. And so some of that takes us putting in the effort to be wise and to be responsible. All right, principle 6 is be patient and don't take shortcuts, aka be wary of get-rich-quick schemes. Yeah, I think there's lots of proverbs that caution us against taking shortcuts or being overly eager to have a lot of money. And honestly, when I started thinking about this, it made me think of like MLMs or pyramid schemes. But I don't know how much of a temptation that is for us to fall into MLMs. Not saying that it never happens, but I don't think that that's like the big thing. But yeah, like the sentiment is the same here. Like, don't be so eager to make money or have wealth that you make foolish decisions or decisions that dishonor God. Proverbs 13:11 says, "Dishonest money dwindles away, but whoever gathers money little by little makes it grow." Proverbs 28:20 says, "A faithful person will be richly blessed, but one eager to get rich will not go unpunished." And later on in chapter 28, it says, "The stingy are eager to get rich and are unaware that poverty awaits them." So the way that we earn our wealth does matter to God. All right, principle 7. Don't let money have power over you. Don't let money have power over you. The thing about money and wealth and possessions and all things related to this is that they have this allure that like really draws our attention. Like we want to have things. We want to store up things for ourselves. And I think that there are extremes in both wealth and in poverty that provide unique temptations for us. In Proverbs 22, verse 7, it says, "The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender." And so Proverbs does acknowledge that being poor is difficult. Like, it's not easy. With the idea of like borrowing, you become a slave to the one that you're taking money from. It's not an easy or desirable thing. But there's also caution there against wanting wealth and wanting to have so much money. Proverbs 30, verses 7 through 9 says, "Two things I ask of you, Lord. Do not refuse me before I die. Keep falsehood and lies far from me. Give me neither poverty nor riches, but give me only my daily bread. Otherwise, I may have too much and disown you and say, 'Who is the Lord?' Or I may become poor and steal and so dishonor the name of my God." So the person writing here is asking God to keep him somewhere in the middle. Like, He doesn't want to be too poor because then he might really find himself in dire circumstances and he might steal and dishonor God. But he doesn't want to be rich because he might forget that he's reliant on God. And so in either extreme, money is the thing that's really driving the force or driving how he sees God. So don't let money have power over you. Don't become so obsessed with it, whether you have a lot of it or you don't have a lot of it. Don't let it be the thing that is consuming your thoughts. Honor God first. Principle 8. Be careful not to make a rule out of a single proverb. Be careful not to make a rule out of a single proverb. I talked about this a little earlier, but there are a lot of proverbs that talk about saving. So Proverbs 13:22 says, a good person leaves an inheritance for their children's children, but a sinner's wealth is stored up for the righteous. Proverbs 21:20 says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but a fool gulps theirs down. But we also have to hold these proverbs about saving in tension with Jesus' words. So take his warning to the rich young ruler in Mark 10:21. Jesus looks at this ruler who has a lot of money, and he tells him, go sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. So what do? We've got proverbs that talk about saving, and now we have Jesus' words that talk about giving everything away. We have to hold these in tension. We have to make wise decisions. Because if we solely follow the proverbs that talk about saving, what's going to happen when we're called to radical generosity at the expense of our savings account? Are we going to ignore it? We're just going to keep saving because there's a proverb that talks about saving so I can give to my children. But I think we're going to talk about Mark later on. And so that's just an example. There's other examples in the Bible as well of times that we have to hold the scriptures in tension. Okay, that was a lot of Proverbs, and there was lots that I didn't read, but hopefully it gave you some helpful principles from there. Now we are going to go on to Ecclesiastes. I really think that Ecclesiastes is one of my favorite books because, King Solomon is just lamenting and questioning a lot of things, and he's a little melodramatic, which I love. But yeah, he notes that sometimes things work out for righteous people. You work hard and you prosper, and then sometimes you don't. In Ecclesiastes 7, he says, I've seen both the righteous dying young and the wicked living long lives. And so there's this tension here. Sometimes things make sense. You do the things that you're supposed to do. You follow the Proverbs and it works out. But other times it just doesn't. And so one of the guiding questions here is that when we're thinking about all of these verses and we're holding these ideas in tension, what do we do with our wealth? So the guiding question of Ecclesiastes is, what do I do with my wealth? How do I live? And the whole book is kind of written with this overarching remembrance of death, and there's lots of talk about how time passes and generations come and go and so on, and this idea that all of the work that we're putting in while we're on earth, you have to remember when we die, what happens to that? And it's not really satisfactory because there's not the end of the story that we know. We know what happens after death, but in Ecclesiastes, there's lots of this just really questioning, what's the point of our wealth? And so if you know anything about King Solomon, you know that he was very rich. Ecclesiastes 2:4-9 talks about all of the work that he puts in. He uses all of his money. He builds these houses. He spends his money however he wants. Verse 9 says, I became greater by far than anyone in Jerusalem before me. In all this, my wisdom stayed with me. But then we see in Ecclesiastes 2, verse 10, so just a little further down, 10 through 11, where he says, my heart took delight in all my labor, and this was the reward for all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all that my hands had done and everything I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless. A chasing after the wind, nothing was gained under the sun. So if King Solomon, this man who had so much money and so much wealth, he had silver and gold, he built himself beautiful palaces, he had everything. If all of that couldn't bring him any joy or happiness, why do we think that money and wealth will bring us joy and happiness? And so that's the next principle. We can't think that money will bring us joy or happiness. Okay, so money and wealth won't bring us joy. Then what's the point of working? What's the point of even having wealth? Ecclesiastes 3 is the time for everything passage. It's like a time to be born and a time to die and so on. And in verse 9 of Ecclesiastes 3, the author asks, "What do workers gain for their toil?" And then he answers his question. "I've seen the burden that God has laid on the human race. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He's also set eternity in the human heart. No one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end." So in light of the fact that God is the one who works to make everything beautiful, God is the one who blesses us, we receive good gifts from God, and so knowing that, we should enjoy the blessings that God has given us with the time that he's given us. But also remember that God cares about how we use our money. So if we fear God and we keep his commandments, we should know that everything we do is going to be called into judgment. And so we can enjoy the blessings that he gives us, but how we enjoy these blessings really does matter. Ecclesiastes 5, verses 10 through 11 says, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them?" Ecclesiastes 5, verses 18 through 20 says, "This is what I've observed to be good, that it's appropriate for a person to eat, to drink, and to find satisfaction in their toilsome labor under the sun during the few days of life God has given them. For this is their lot. Moreover, when God gives someone wealth and possessions and the ability to enjoy them, to accept their lot and be happy in their toil, this is a gift from God." So enjoy good things with the time that God has given you. But also remember that if you love money, you will never be satisfied. This is loving money. It will never satisfy you. Okay, this was a flyover of the 3 books, but I hope that you have something to consider, something to chew on. Just remember that when we're reading the wisdom literature and applying it to different issues in our life, especially about money, we have to hold it in tension with other scripture. And if you remember nothing else about what I just said, remember that we are to seek wisdom about our money. So seek wisdom about your money. Proverbs 4:7 says this, "The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom." The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom. Pray about how you use your money. Ask questions, read scripture, share with mentors and friends. The beginning of wisdom is this, get wisdom.